It was a bright Tuesday morning in Los Angeles. The office was buzzing with the usual sounds of keyboards tapping and conversations spilling over the cubicles. Emily, 31, sat at her desk with a cup of coffee cooling by her side. She wore her favorite blue blouse, the one she had chosen deliberately that morning to feel a little more confident before the big meeting. She adjusted her notes, straightened her posture, and tried to focus on the presentation she would deliver in just a few minutes. But as she walked past the hallway, she caught fragments of whispers that were not meant for her ears. A pair of colleagues stood by the printer, leaning closer, voices low but sharp enough to cut through the air. "She's not really good enough for that position," one of them murmured. The other chuckled, replying, "She's pretty, sure, but looks don't get the job done." Emily froze for a second, her heart stumbling in her chest. She kept walking, pretending not to hear, the same polite smile fixed on her face. She stepped into the conference room, greeted everyone as if nothing had happened, and sat down, her notes spread neatly before her. From the outside, she looked calm, composed, professional. But inside, her world had tilted. Their words were played like a cruel echo, not good enough. Just pretty. As if all the late nights, the extra hours, the countless projects she had poured herself into meant nothing. As if her value could be reduced to a careless sentence spoken in passing. She tried to focus on the discussion around her, but every time someone looked her way, she wondered, do they think the same thing? Do they all believe I don't deserve this? By the time the meeting ended, Emily's smile felt heavy, like a mask she could barely hold up. Alone at her desk, she pressed her palms against her thighs under the table, trying to steady her breathing. She knew she should let it go, that whispers were just noise, but the words clung to her like invisible chains. That single comment had the power to unravel her confidence, to make her question everything she had worked for. If you've ever had a stray remark pierce through you like that, you know the feeling. One moment, you're standing tall, and the next, someone's careless words make you shrink inside your own skin. You replay them again and again, as though hidden in their cruelty is a truth you must uncover. And in that endless replay, you begin to forget who you really are. But here is the truth. You're not what they say about you. You're not defined by office gossip, by strangers' comments on social media, or by the whispers behind your back. If you spend your life living inside the definitions of others, you will lose yourself. Their voices may be loud, but your worth is not up for debate. And that is what today's video is about. Welcome to Aura Rise, the space where we heal, reclaim our worth, and rise into the women we were always meant to be. Today, we are going to talk about how to break free from the trap of other people's opinions and learn to stand firmly in your own truth. Because the life you deserve is not built on their judgments. It is built on your voice, your courage, and your belief in yourself. Part 2. Why words hurt us so deeply. Words are invisible, yet they can leave bruises deeper than any wound you see on the skin. Science tells us that the brain processes social rejection in the same regions that register physical pain. That is why a careless comment, a mocking laugh, or the silence after you speak can ache in your chest as though you had been struck. It is not weakness. It is human biology. We are wired to belong, to be accepted, and so words that question our worth strike at the very core of that need. In today's world, those words echo louder than ever. What used to be whispers in hallways has become constant noise on our screens. A single post can attract a flood of comments, praise, yes, but also criticism. A careless remark at work is magnified by gossip. Even strangers who know nothing about your heart feel entitled to define you with a sentence. It is no wonder so many women find themselves walking through life with a fragile sense of self, measured not by their truth, but by the voices outside them. We fall into a dangerous pattern, believing the noise more than we believe our own voice. 100 compliments can fade in seconds, but one cruel word lingers for years. Why? Because somewhere deep inside, we confuse what they say with who we are. We forget that their words are a reflection of them, not of us. And the moment we hand over our identity to others, we begin to abandon ourselves. But here is the gentle reminder you need to hold on to. You are not what they say. You are not defined by the labels, the gossip, or the judgment. Your worth is not a debate. It is a truth. In this video, we will walk through 4 parts together. First, why words have the power to hurt us so deeply. Second, the truth about your worth and why it cannot be shaken by someone else's opinion. Third, the practical steps to stop letting their voices control you. And finally, how to nurture self-love so that no matter what the world says, you remain rooted in your own strength. Because at the end of the day, you cannot control what others choose to say, but you can choose how much power you give it. Part 3, the weight of their words. Emily still remembers a hallway in her high school, the sharp fluorescent lights above, the laughter of classmates echoing too loudly. She was 15 when someone whispered "weird" as she walked past, her sketchbook clutched tightly to her chest. It was one word tossed carelessly, but it stuck. She never opened her sketchbook at school again. She stopped wearing the bright scarf she loved because it drew too much attention. She smiled less, spoke less, tried to fold herself into whatever shape seemed safest. That single word became a shadow she carried, an invisible label pressed against her skin. Weird. Years later, she thought she had left those moments behind. After all, she had a job, friends, responsibilities. But one day, in a meeting, when a colleague casually questioned her idea, she felt the same sting, as if that teenage girl had been summoned back. One word years ago had trained her to shrink in the face of judgment. This is the hidden weight of words. They do not always vanish when the moment ends. They plant themselves inside us, like tiny seeds that grow into vines, curling around our confidence, our choices, our identity. What begins as a comment can turn into a script we repeat to ourselves. I'm too much. I'm not enough. I'm not like everyone else. Many women live this way, carrying invisible labels given to them by others. A mother's offhand remark about weight that becomes a lifelong battle with mirrors. A teacher's criticism that still echoes whenever they try something new. A friend's betrayal that whispers, "You can't trust anyone." These words, spoken in passing, can follow us for decades, long after the person who said them has forgotten. The danger is not only that we hear their voices, but that we begin to mistake them for our own. We take their judgments and wear them as if they are truth, walking through life defined not by who we are, but by what others decided to see. But here's the truth I want you to hold. Their words can touch you, yes, but they cannot define you. Labels only have power if you let them stick. The same word that once silenced Emily could also be reclaimed. Weird could mean different. Different could mean unique. Unique could mean powerful. The challenge is not to erase what was said, but to decide what you will believe. To ask yourself, is this label really mine or is it someone else's projection? And if it is not mine, am I willing to put it down? Because the truth is this, words are only weights if you agree to carry them. Part 4. The truth about your worth. Emily didn't realize how many decisions she had surrendered to other people's voices until one afternoon. Sitting in a coffee shop, she opened her journal and made a list. She wrote down opportunities she had turned away from over the years. The audition she skipped because a classmate once said her voice was too thin. The promotion she never applied for because she feared her colleagues would think she was ambitious in the wrong way. The relationship she ended too soon because her friends whispered, "He's not your type." Page after page filled with moments where she had chosen silence, safety, and invisibility over possibility. She stared at the list, heart aching, and whispered to herself, "I wasn't living my life. I was living theirs." The truth is, Emily is not alone. Many women carry invisible cages built not of walls, but of words. We don't try the thing we secretly long for because we are afraid of gossip. We don't wear the dress we love because someone once teased us. We stay quiet in meetings because we remember a time when speaking up made us the target of judgment. Without realizing it, we begin to shape our lives not around what we want, but around what we fear others might say. But here's what psychology tells us. Self-worth cannot be outsourced. It is not built from likes, comments, or nods of approval. It is built from within. Our brains are wired to seek connection, So rejection stings like physical pain. But worth is not the same as acceptance. Acceptance comes and goes with the opinions of others. Worth remains rooted in the fact that you are human, that you exist, that your voice, your dreams, your heart matter. Think about it. If every opinion disappeared tomorrow, if there were no comments, no gossip, no comparisons, would your value change? Of course not. Yet too often we live as if it would. We hand our sense of self over to people who do not carry our dreams, who do not walk our path, who may not even remember the words they threw so casually. Emily began to realize this truth when she caught herself hesitating to share an idea at work. The familiar thought rose, what if they think it's stupid? And then another thought pushed back, what if it's brilliant? What if it changes something? In that moment, she chose to speak. The room was quiet, but her voice was steady. And when her boss nodded and said, that's worth considering, she felt something shift. Not because he approved, but because she had dared to show up for herself. That is the essence of self-worth. It is not about being liked or admired. It is about choosing to stand in your own truth, even when no one claps. It is about recognizing that the power to define you does not lie in someone else's mouth. It lies in your own heart. The world will always have something to say. People will project their fears, their insecurities, their biases onto you, but you cannot control their tongues. What you can control is your belief. Do you believe their story about you, or do you believe your own? Because here is the gentle truth. You are not what they say. You never were. And the moment you stop living for their voices and start listening to your own, that is the moment you step into your real worth. As Emily wrote in her journal one evening, I used to think my value depended on how the world saw me. Now I know my value depends on how I choose to see myself. And perhaps that is the shift every woman must make, from asking, what do they think of me? To declaring, this is who I am. Part 5. Gentle steps to free yourself from others' opinions. Emily used to think freedom meant proving herself to everyone who doubted her. If they whispered she wasn't smart enough, she would work twice as hard. If they hinted she was only noticed for her looks, she would try to bury her beauty under competence. But no matter how hard she tried, there was always another comment, another judgment. It felt like running on a treadmill, exhausting herself but never getting closer to peace. The turning point came one evening when she sat with her journal and asked herself a simple question: what if I stopped fighting their voices and started listening to mine? That was the night she began to take small, gentle steps toward freeing herself. Step 1. Awareness, noticing the weight of their words. The first step was awareness. For Emily, it began with something as simple as a notebook. She promised herself that for 1 week, she would write down every sentence that changed the way she felt about herself. At work, a colleague casually remarked, she only got this project because she's good at presenting, not because she's actually strategic. At a friend's dinner, someone joked, you're still single at 31? Maybe you're too picky. They were throwaway lines to others, but to Emily they'd like tiny stones in her chest. Each night, she opened her journal and copied them down, line after line. At first, it felt unbearable, like reopening wounds she had tried to ignore. But after a few days, she began to see a pattern. The heaviness she carried wasn't random. It always came from words she allowed to echo inside her. Comments she replayed until they didn't sound like other people anymore. They sounded like her. That was the painful truth. She had unknowingly handed her self-worth over to voices that didn't deserve it. Awareness didn't erase the sting of those words, but it gave her something she had lost: clarity. And clarity was the first form of freedom. Because once you see the weight you are carrying, you can finally decide whether to put it down. Step 2. Challenge the voice, asking what is really true. The next step was questioning. Emily realized that awareness alone wasn't enough. She had pages of words written down, but if she didn't challenge them, they would continue to live in her mind like uninvited guests. So she made a rule for herself. Whenever the old phrases echoed, you're not enough, you're not qualified, you're too much, she would pause and whisper a single question. Is this really true? Or is it just their fear projected onto me? One memory came rushing back, sharper than the rest. In high school, a teacher had once looked at her exam and said flatly, "You'll never be good at math." At 15, those words pierced her like a verdict. She carried them for years, repeating them to herself whenever numbers appeared on a page. But the day she chose to challenge them, she began listing facts. She had managed budgets at work with accuracy, analyzed data for important projects, even helped her niece with algebra homework. The truth she had believed all this time crumbled in her hands. It had never been truth at all, just one person's careless judgment, spoken in a moment, but allowed to live in her for a decade. That was when Emily understood. When you challenge a voice, you take back its power. Each time she asked, "Is this really true?" The weight lifted a little. She saw clearly that many of the statements she had built her fears upon were not mirrors of her ability, but mirrors of other people's limitations. What once felt like solid walls revealed themselves to be paper thin, collapsing the moment she dared to push against them. And slowly, she began to learn that the most dangerous lies are not the ones told by others, but the ones we repeat to ourselves without ever questioning. Step 3. Replace with your truth, planting gentler words. Awareness and questioning opened the door, but Emily soon realized that leaving the space empty was not enough. The voices she had challenged would always try to return, unless she replaced them with something stronger, something gentler. So she began to plant new words, her words. She bought a stack of sticky notes and wrote simple affirmations. I am capable. I am enough. I choose myself. She placed them where she couldn't ignore them, on her bathroom mirror, on her laptop, even on the back of her phone case. Every morning as she brushed her teeth, those words stared back at her. Every afternoon between emails, her eyes landed on them again. At first, they felt awkward, even fake. She would whisper them under her breath and think, do I really believe this? But repetition has power. Just as negative words had carved deep grooves in her mind, positive ones began to lay new pathways. The more she repeated them, the more familiar they became, like a melody she couldn't forget. On the hardest days, when an old insult resurfaced or when doubt crept in during a meeting, Emily would read the notes aloud. Sometimes her voice cracked with tears, sometimes it trembled with defiance, but each time the words sank a little deeper. Over time, she noticed the shift. The whispers of, "You're not enough," grew quieter, while her own truth grew louder. Replacing others' definitions with her own became more than a habit. It was an act of self-love, practiced daily. She no longer waited for the world to hand her approval. She was learning to give herself the validation she'd been craving all along. Because the truth is this, when you speak kinder words to yourself, you are not lying. You are finally telling the story that should have been told from the beginning. Step 4. Protect your space, guarding your peace. Freedom wasn't only about changing her inner voice. Emily realized it also meant guarding what voices she allowed into her world. For too long, she had kept doors open to noise that chipped away at her confidence. One evening, scrolling through Instagram, she felt that familiar heaviness rise again. Perfect vacations, polished bodies, constant achievements. It was like a chorus whispering, "You'll never measure up." That night, she pressed unfollow. Not out of jealousy, but out of protection. She did the same with her group chats, silencing threads filled with gossip and negativity. She limited lunches with colleagues who thrived on comparison and sought out those who respected her work. At first, she worried it would make her seem cold or distant. But slowly, she realized she was not obligated to keep absorbing voices that left her smaller than before. Guarding her peace was not rejection, it was self-respect. In their place, she chose to cultivate healthier spaces. She kept close friends who cheered her wins without envy, mentors who reminded her of her potential, communities that spoke of growth instead of judgment. She began curating her environment with the same intention she once used for her skincare routine. Just as harsh products could scar her skin, toxic voices had the power to scar her soul. And just as nourishing products made her glow, positive voices nurtured her from within. Protecting her space was not selfish, it was survival. It was the deliberate act of choosing peace over poison, of building an environment where her truth could finally breathe without being drowned out by the noise of others. Step 5. Nurture your inner voice, building strength from within. The final step was learning to make her own voice louder than all the others. For Emily, this didn't happen overnight. It began with small, almost fragile acts. Each morning, she opened her journal and let her pen spill whatever was tangled inside. Some days it was anger, some days it was sorrow, and some days it was just a single sentence, "I want to feel whole again." Writing became a way of listening to herself, of reminding her heart that its voice mattered. She also started therapy, though at first she hesitated. What if it means I'm weak, she thought. But sitting across from her therapist, she discovered the opposite. Speaking her truth was not weakness. It was an act of courage. For the first time, she allowed her story to be heard without judgment, and in that space, her inner voice began to grow stronger. At home, she created rituals of self-love, gentle anchors that reminded her of who she was beyond the noise. She lit a candle at night and whispered kind words to her reflection in the mirror. You are capable. You are worthy. You are enough. Before important meetings, she paused to take 3 deep breaths, letting calm replace the rising tide of anxiety. Over time, these practices built something powerful, resilience. When colleagues whispered or strangers judged, she still noticed the sting, but it no longer pierced her. Her inner voice rose up to meet the noise, steady and unwavering. You are not what they say. You are who you choose to be. And with every choice to nurture that voice, Emily's life began to shift, not because the world grew kinder, but because she had finally become her own source of strength. Emily's journey wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, steady, like watering a plant each day until it grew strong roots. Awareness, questioning, replacing, protecting, nurturing, step by step, she built a fortress inside herself. Not one made of walls, but of truth. And perhaps this is the lesson for every woman. Real strength does not come from pleasing everyone, but from living in alignment with yourself. The world will always talk, but you do not have to bend to its noise. You only have to rise above it. As Emily wrote in her journal one night, the most powerful freedom is not changing what they say. It is no longer needing their words to define me. Because the truth is simple, strength is not in silencing every critic. Strength is in refusing to silence your own voice. Part 6. The transformation, living beyond their words. Months passed and Emily found herself in a place she never imagined. The office she once entered with dread now felt different. One morning, her manager called her in and told her she was being promoted. Just a year ago, the news would have sent her spiraling, anticipating the whispers. She doesn't deserve it. She just got lucky. She's not as capable as they think. Those voices would have played in her mind louder than the achievement itself. But this time, Emily smiled. She walked out of the office, her steps steady, her heart calm. The whispers came, of course, they always do, but now they no longer pierced her. Instead, she thought quietly to herself, they can talk, but I know who I am. The change didn't happen overnight. It was the result of every small choice she had made, every boundary she set, every truth she replaced, every night she wrote in her journal instead of replaying their words. And now, standing taller than she ever had, Emily realized she had not silenced the world. She had simply stopped letting the world silence her. Her transformation showed up in the simplest places. She began dressing the way she wanted, bold colors, playful patterns, clothes that made her feel alive instead of clothes chosen to fit into someone else's definition of professional or appropriate. She started posting online again, but this time it wasn't curated for approval. She shared her thoughts, her art, her moments of joy, not for likes, but because they mattered to her. She laughed more freely, spoke more honestly, and carried herself with an ease that had nothing to do with perfection and everything to do with self-acceptance. Friends noticed. "You seem lighter," one said over coffee. And Emily smiled, because it was true. She had finally stopped carrying the weight of other people's voices. Perhaps the most profound shift came in her relationships. Before, she often bent herself to keep the peace, agreeing when she disagreed, hiding parts of herself to avoid judgment. Now she showed up as she was. Some people pulled away, others drew closer. But for the first time, Emily didn't measure her worth by who stayed or who left. She measured it by how true she remained to herself. Looking back, she could still hear the echoes of old comments, but they no longer defined her. They were like background noise in a crowded cafe, present but powerless. What defined her now was the voice inside, the one she had nurtured patiently, the one that whispered every morning, "I am enough. One, choose myself." And that is the quiet victory no one can take away. When you stop letting others define you, you finally begin to live. Not perfectly, not without fear, but freely. Emily's journey reminds us of a truth too often forgotten. Freedom is not about proving the world wrong. It is about no longer needing its approval to feel right. Because when you stop living in the shadow of their words, you step into the light of your own. When you stop letting others define you, that's when life truly begins. At the end of the day, you're not what they say. You are not the careless words whispered in office hallways, the labels handed to you in school corridors, or the judgments slipped casually into conversations. You are the story you choose to write, the truth you choose to believe, the life you choose to live. Here's the gentle truth. People can call you 100 different names. They can say you're too much, not enough, too loud, too quiet, too ambitious, too ordinary. But none of it becomes your truth unless you choose to carry it. Their voices are temporary. Your voice is eternal. And the only one that truly matters is the one that comes from within. So, when the noise of the world grows loud, I hope you remember this. You are not here to live up to their opinions. You are here to live into your own truth. You are not what they call you. You are what you choose to answer to. If this message touched you, follow Aura Rise to continue this journey of self-love and mental health. Here, we are building a community where women rise stronger together, where self-worth is reclaimed, and where healing begins with you. Share this video with a friend who has ever been hurt by the weight of others' words, because sometimes what she needs most is the reminder that her story belongs to her alone. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever faced a moment when someone's words made you doubt yourself? How did you handle it? Share your story in the comments, because your voice might be the reminder another woman needs to feel less alone and a little stronger today. I'll see you in the next video, ladies. Until then, keep rising, keep healing, and keep loving yourself.